Goes to a vector species. So
And the
it
incubation
has the potential to
period,
contract it.
right. The other thing that I do want to bring into this conversation, I'm sorry, my turtle just jumped into the tank and startled me. The other thing that I want to bring into this conversation is raccoon roundworm. It
Oh,
is
Lord.
a parasite that is carried in feces. It is much more prevalent in raccoons than rabies. It is the reason why you cannot use raccoon enclosures for any other animal. And the only way to properly clean a raccoon enclosure is with a blowtorch, because no disinfectants, no antiseptics penetrate the egg shell casing of that parasite. And that parasite will infiltrate all body tissues in an infected animal. Raccoons can carry this in their GI system, again, asymptomatically for the entirety of their lives. But anybody who comes into contact with raccoon feces can contract it. So now,
Human included.
I'm sorry?
Human included.
Humans included, and again, it is fatal. It can cause blindness, it can infiltrate the brain, it can cause brain damage. So if you have raccoon feces, I mean, we rehabbers, we try to be scrupulous because other animals can contract it in the wild and, again, transmit it. Opossums, groundhogs, foxes, they can get raccoon roundworm. So we are scrupulous. But, again, there is way, way more likelihood of a fecal to body tissue exposure with this animal. And again, these are things that we learn when we get these licenses to work with them.
For those, and I know that people hop in the chat, the reason why quarantine was not an option is because they can be asymptomatic. You can carry rabies and be asymptomatic. The only way to test for rabies is through a necropsy, like the actual brain tissue is what you need. And so that's part of the reason why that was not an option. How come rehabbers do not have a wildlife rate? Yeah, okay, so sorry, Dawn, it was all caps, so I thought somebody was yelling at us, but no. So yeah, quarantine isn't an option. They could have been asymptomatic the whole time. They had to know.
Okay, all Ginger House wear, because as of July 31st, 2020, no raccoons tested positive for rabies out of the 5. Where are you talking about? Because I know that in New York City, we have had many positive rabies tests this year alone.
First things first. We know that that is not true. You cannot just quarantine them and hope that they don't have, carry rabies. So just an unnecessary argument. We've told you why quarantine was not an option. You are sitting here with people who have dedicated their entire lives and their entire budget and their bank account to animals. So I find it entirely insulting that you would insinuate that we are openly encouraging and wanting those animals to have been euthanized. It's insulting. So move on.
So the reason why every raccoon that comes into rehab is not euthanized is because rabies vector rehabbers know the proper protocol and wear gloves. Anybody seen one of Matt's lives? He is gloved feeding all of these animals that he has raised and vaccinated. There are protocols to keep from having exposures between these animals and the humans caring for them. And that is because of the potential for danger. That is the reason why there is an additional license required, and you must be a regular rehabber, a generalist rehabber, for years before you are allowed to even apply for a rabies vector permit.
RM, this is, we don't know if they have rabies or not until we get the results. They could have rabies, yes.
And they wouldn't need to be euthanized. It's 100% fatal.
And they won't need to be euthanized because the disease is going to do it for them.
Yeah, it's 100%.
Trust me, it's a horrible, horrible way to go. Horrible. You don't want to go that way. But yeah, they could be and not know about it.
And again, you guys,
Absolutely.
please understand that like we deal in like factual information here, and we do understand that it is a unlikely event. Like we're not sitting here saying that there's a 90% chance of it happening. But what they have done is put the public at risk. They have shown millions of followers that it looks cute and fun and cuddly to mix a vector species that carries a potential 100% fatal disease for humans and mix them with other wildlife and other humans. That's what's the problem here. Okay, it's not that the raccoon more than likely has rabies. That's not what we're saying. We understand the factual information here. What we're saying is he put millions at risk by showing it on social media and doing it in a way that was wholly improper, actively against the law, and he knew what he was doing was against the law.
And they were bringing it out in public and exposing unwilling, unknowing people.
And for anybody, especially
at the same time that we're saying this, I want everyone to understand we also have compassion to the couple that lost to what they considered as their pets, and they loved them, and they're in pain, and we know that. We know how painful it is for them. Of course, they cared. They loved these animals. There's no doubt about that. And there's no doubt that they're grieving, and this is a messy situation. What we're trying to look is what can we learn from it? What can we learn from it so this will not happen again to other people and other animals?
We're not saying that we are in any way pleased with any of this. This is not the outcome we would ever want for an animal. We give up our entire lives to see that these animals survive.
First things first, listen, you need to, I don't know what your education is, but if you don't know what you're talking about, it kind of like seems like that. You have a panel of people here that are completely educated and experts in this field. So please be respectful.
You have at least
and open-minded
up here on the screen.
I do have one more thing that I want to throw in there too. When it comes to rabies, especially the article that I read that I can never think of the dude's name, but the guy that was the owner
your
of Peanut.
background so people understand the kind of authority you are speaking with, because we have a lot of new people in here.
Say that again?
Please tell them your background, because I want them to know the kind of experience and education you do have.
Oh, what are my credentials? I've been rehabbing in Maine and California. I've been over there for 4 years. But I am currently in Maine. I'm a wildlife rehabber, have been for over 25 years. I've been an emergency vet tech, zookeeper, you name it. I've done it if it's animal related. I also have, for the past 14 years, helped teach the rabies vector certification class in New York State in their big conference for NICE work, which is the New York State Wildlife Rehabilitation Council. So rabies is definitely one of my fortes. I specialize in bats, but I also do all the rabies vector. So one of the things that I wanted to point out, especially since the article that I read, the guy that's the owner of Peanut or whatever, said that a few months ago, however long a few months ago was, like 2, 3, I don't know, someone dropped off Fred at their doorstep. So they've only had him for a matter of a few months, meaning he's young. You can see in the picture of him at Starbucks or Dunkin' or wherever he was, with the cream all over his face, and he was a young juvenile. So people are like, well, he was just a baby. Obviously, he's not going to have rabies. Wrong answer. I had an eyes closed newborn with umbilical cord come into rehab. After 2 weeks of rehabbing this cute little baby, He just started to not thrive, didn't want to eat anymore, was like, what's going on? My mother-in-law was helping me raise these babies. And I was like, you know what? Mom, you're not vaccinated. I think we should probably get this tested because it ended up dying. And I was like, this is a newborn, like with umbilical cord. And guess what? If mom is rabid and she cleans her babies with her saliva, that's going to be an infected baby. And it tested
Rabies
positive.
can cross the placental barrier.
I did not think it could. I thought it was only post-birth.
You know what? I may be wrong, but I was under the impression that
I think it's just after birth when they're grooming them.
Okay, that's something that I will have to look into because
Yeah.
So when you get, this question is for Matt and anyone else who rehabs raccoons, just to, again, simplify and clarify to the people here. So if you get a raccoon into your rescue, do you quarantine it before you introduce it to other raccoons?
Always.
And
because
that's
of that.
more for other illnesses. That's more for distemper than rabies because
And parvo.
and parvo.
Okay, so we're talking more than one disease that can happen here, and there's a reason why they're quarantined, and there's a good reason.
Temper is scarier
why,
than even anything.
a different reason why you separate them and quarantine them, because you want to make sure that they don't transfer any disease to other animals in their clan, right?
Correct. But again, because of the potential for rabies to remain asymptomatic for the animal's lifetime, a 2-week or a 1 month or a 6-month quarantine period is meaningless with rabies.
Okay, so for that, I would ask, so when you get them, do you vaccinate them?
Some rehabbers do, but again, the protocol must be followed. The personal protection, the cleaning of the cages or surfaces with a blowtorch, the very careful. I mean, you have a baby raccoon with diarrhea who, comes in just even from a formula change, from going from the mother's milk to formula. They can get a loose stool. That stool splashes, gets you in the eye, gets you in the mouth. God forbid. That's raccoon roundworm. That's rabies. That's coccidia. That is a huge problem.
Okay, so basically what you're saying is you quarantine them to make sure that they don't have any illness that shows within 2 weeks, and then you basically vaccinate them, and in general, they are supposed to go back to the wild.
Correct.
Okay, I hope that clarifies it to the people here, that there's a reason why these protocols are there. It's to protect the animals, to protect the people, to protect the public. And that's why they're called wildlife and not pet.
Sash brought up a example that I already brought up, but I'll bring it up again because there's new people in here. She brought up Nudie the nutria. I personally was affected by that. So let's touch on some other cases that made national news and why these are different. Nudie the nutria, first of all, nutria are not a vector species. Nutria are also if you don't know what nutria is, basically it's a beaver from South America. They were hunted to extinction basically in South America, moved here for the fur trade. They eat 80% of their body weight every single day in vegetation, and lo and behold, they are expensive to farm. And so when the farms were not successful, they were released directly into the wild, and we have a huge invasive problem here in Louisiana because they are breaking down our river banks. They're very invasive. They're eating all our vegetation. It's a huge issue with our marshlands. So again, another argument for why we don't cross state and country barriers with animals. But Nudity and Nutria was seized by Wildlife and Fisheries. They were then assisted in getting the proper permitting for Nudie because of the outcry of people in the general public. They wanted Nudie back with his family. They thought it was inhumane that Nudie was removed, that he wasn't doing any harm. There's no harm, no foul. Give Nudie back to his owners. And that's exactly what happened. And I know a lot of you guys think that that is a happy ending. Unfortunately, within a month of that happening, there were multiple people who were going out and unaliving the mothers of Nutria so that they could seize their baby young and then sell them off as pets because Nutria were now more popular. Okay. And so they were then seized by Wildlife and Fisheries. Wildlife rehabilitators like myself ended up with the babies. It was a huge headache because they are an invasive species. So we either could have euthanized them, which were babies. That was really hard. Or our other options were to pay to have them spayed and or neutered, vaccinated, and then could only be released on private land. There is a ripple effect of everything that happens. And then when you put that on the internet, that rippling effect can turn into tidal waves. Okay. And that is exactly what was happening with Peanut, and the government had to step in. They saw a huge potential health crisis that was gonna happen. It was going to happen. Inevitably, people were going to see this pet raccoon going out and about. And thinking that it was fun and cute, and were going to want to do it for themselves. Just so you guys know, legally, in terms of squirrels being pets, a little over 30 states in our country, it is completely illegal to have a pet. For the 19 that it is legal, they all come with giant asterisks next to them, okay? There's certain species that you cannot have. So you might be able to have a red squirrel, but you couldn't have a flying squirrel or a gray squirrel. I am not aware of a state where you can take a wild squirrel and have it be your pet. I'm not aware of one. So all of them, you can get them from breeders. Those breeders have all the proper permitting, all the proper licensing, have to go through all of these steps to even be a breeder. Okay. So there is not a state in this country that I'm aware of, that you can pick up a wild squirrel out of the wild and have them become your pet and it be legal. So it is just not a thing, just so everyone knows.
Okay, so first things first is talking about online presence. The fact of the matter is, a lot of us have been rehabbing way longer than social media has existed. For me, I was doing this 38 years without social media, out of my pocket. And I've been here on TikTok. It'll be 2 years the end of December. Ms. Nutsy McGee, that is not correct. And I will get back to that in just a minute. But to say that any of us, because I've had people accuse me of getting rich here on TikTok. I mean, I happen to be married to a surgeon. I happen to live on Long Island on the water. My husband works very, very hard to provide for our family. And he gives me a very generous, we've discussed what I can spend out of family money because I am not anymore working to bring money into our home. We discussed what we could afford to contribute to something that he considers a hobby of mine that is not necessary for me to do. And it is a large amount. I spend about $150,000 a year on wildlife rehab. And that, some of it comes from donations from you guys, some of it comes from TikTok, when I get a video that does well and I get monetized, and some of it comes from what my husband earns. And if I only had to, because not only am I donating family money, I am donating all of my time. I am not going on vacation with my family. My whole family misses out because we don't take a vacation. I don't go out to dinner. birthday parties or this or that. I miss because, hey, wait a second, this baby is really critical. I can't leave right now. Sorry. And so I had somebody say, oh, because I was showing the squirrels in my backyard. Oh, you live on the water. I think I'm going to quit my job and become a rehabber so I can have a fancy house on the water. That is the furthest thing from the truth. My husband works his ass off to support our family, and I am already giving so much of what he is earning and what I have to give. And you know what? Maybe I'll only take 50 squirrels instead of 200 next year. And I won't take money from TikTok or donations. And then 150 squirrels are going to die. There is a limit to what we can do, and we are so over our limit already. So if anybody thinks that, and you know what, I am lucky to be in this situation, and I know how lucky I am. And the animals are lucky I am in this situation. And yes, we are still looking for a rich husband for Matt. He would love an orthopedic surgeon too. I mean,
Rich husbands for everyone.
Verge too. Verge is second on the list.
The older the better too.
yeah, Matt gets the first rich husband we find. But the fact that we have social media as a tool to educate people about what we do helps the animals because it gets them to us faster. We are 911. We are the emergency room. So having social media educate people, Animal Health Now, state lists, we exist, is fabulous. But having social media as a tool to monetize what we do exponentially helps us increase the volume of animals we can care for and the kind of care we can give. Not one of us has a dime left over from what we make on TikTok in our pockets at the end of that season.
And they cannot, just so that you all know, you can all go and check everything on the irs.gov website, and they literally have to. You can look at their tax returns
If
and
we
see
are 501c3, if we're not, we don't have to disclose. But
Yes,
I
but
have
most
501c3 status. Carly, I think you do too.
Yep.
And if anyone here doesn't, please do. And if you need help with that, Pandora's Hope is here for that. We will help you get that created. First things first, you want, and again, the answer of why the state statutes say about what the state statutes say about quarantine and asymptomatic. You've asked this before, but I'll let the panel answer it again.
Wait, I want to stay on monetization for a minute because I just saw something go by. Yes, these platforms take a great deal of what you guys donate to us. When you're sending gifts, if we're battling, if you're just sending a gift, a subscription, if we have a link tree, any of us, and you want to donate, the best way to support us is go directly to our link tree and donate. However, I have a donor box. That's like a GoFundMe, but because I have a 501c3, they take a much smaller percentage. I know Matt has his Cash App up. Carly has a link tree. Donate directly to the rehabbers. Cut out TikTok. And I'm not saying we don't appreciate what we make here. We are grateful for every cent, but if you want to maximize what you are donating, donate directly to the rehabbers.
I just wanted to add, I had seen a question way back. How can I get involved in rehabbing? How can I help with this? I would start with 3 things. First, do your research. So I know New York, it's Department of Environmental Conservation. Here in Illinois, Ohio, Wisconsin, Indiana, it's Department of Natural Resources, California, Fish and Wildlife. Go on their website, see what the requirements are. Start with that. You can contact them. On those sites, they also usually, I know in Illinois it's a little bit harder to find, you can find a list of local rehabbers near you that are licensed. You can reach out to them. You can also find a facility near you and just ask how you can help out and volunteer. Get started there, being hands-on, learning from somebody, and find somebody you trust. Everyone does things a little bit differently as well, but most of the time, all of us are willing to learn from each other. So you can also learn from multiple people at once. Get hands-on, see what you can do in your community, see where there's a particular need. Out here, there are not a lot of raptor rehabbers. It is far and few between. It is a federal permit, so you might have to drive. If you can't, and you're not, maybe don't want to be as hands-on, or you're not able to at the moment, KL had already talked about this, and, looking at links and bios, find somebody you trust. Pandora had talked about integrity. Find somebody that you think represents your values, and look at ways you can help them in their own, like whatever they have with their bio. They might have links. They might have equipment they might need. Just a little ad in here, trying to get a facility in New York, trying to raise money for that. So there are many ways you can get started, but I would say the first one is just do your research, look at the department that is local for your state, find the requirements, and just get hands-on, volunteering. That's how I started. That's how I would say the majority of us is just finding one near you and saying, is this right for me? Because maybe it's not. It might be hard for people to see the hard things that happen day in and day out. It is very rewarding, but you're not going to know unless you kind of try it for yourself.
And again,
I just wanted to add that.
This is another reason why having facilities is so important. I rehab in my home. It is disruptive enough for my family. Like I said, I have a transport page that is linked to my rehab page. Long Island Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation is my personal page. It is now the networking page for finders, lay people, rehabbers on Long Island. We have 164 volunteers. I can't have 164 people coming in and out of my house. It is so disruptive to my family to have animals here, as it is. I have cages in my backyard. I have cages inside of the house. My garage is full of supplies. My oldest daughter's old bedroom is a rehab room. My garage is rehab. It is everywhere here. It is so disruptive. And every year, I get bigger and busier. So to have volunteers coming and going, it's just invasive at that point. However, I have the most experience of any rehabber in the area. I have the broadest base of knowledge. I am an experienced educator. I want to teach. I want to mentor. I mentor all over the country, but I want to mentor hands-on. Without a facility, I can't do that. And without a facility, the animals get exhausted, tired, emotionally spent people. We cannot refresh ourselves. We cannot get a break. It's so important. And if anything comes out of this, I want them to see the toll it takes on the rehabbers and that there are not enough of us. Because if there were at the facility, there would be much more social pressure to bring the animals when they are found. If it's easy to do, people will be less allowed to do it, to try and raise them on their own.
Now, Carly, we're going to start getting comments about you torturing the kitten soon.
Oh yeah, those are fun ones. What are you doing to the kitten? Why are you torturing it? Put it down.
But I would like to, a lot of the comments here trying to get our big squirrel back on track with the, just please someone post a question again. Asymptomatic. Why is it useless?
Asymptomatic. There are 5 rabies vector species in the United States. These animals can be infected with the rabies virus and remain asymptomatic for the entirety of their lives. They are bats, skunks, raccoons, fox, and groundhogs. It does not mean every state considers these animals rabies vector. In New York, it's only 3. It's raccoons, skunks, and bats. In Connecticut, which is a neighboring state, it is everything but bats. Somebody tell the bats you cannot fly from New York to Connecticut? I don't know. So it is arbitrary, and it is very often based on incorrect statistics, but it is the rule. The reason why they are considered rabies vector, again, is because they can carry the rabies virus in a transmissible form for the entirety of their lives and never become symptomatic. So, you cannot tell if that animal is carrying the rabies virus without testing brain tissue. That requires euthanasia. That is the problem. And once you mix a rabies vector with a non-rabies vector animal that can contract rabies, if you mix that with a turtle, turtles don't get rabies. Not worried about my turtle getting rabies. But if you expose any mammal, that mammal is now at risk. And one of the things that I explained, people, there's never been a rabbit squirrel in my state. There's never been a rabbit squirrel. The reason why there's never been a rabbit squirrel, rat, mouse, little small mammal, is because those animals will not survive an attack, short or long term, from a rabid animal. So let's say that rabid raccoon bites a squirrel, just gets its foot, breaks the skin on its foot, transmits rabies. That foot is still going to get infected. That foot is going to slow that squirrel down. It's going to make it either fall out of a tree, it can't land a jump right, or it's going to not be able to evade a predator, or it's going to get a bloodstream infection. And that animal is not going to survive the incubation period for rabies. So the chances of you ever seeing a rabbit squirrel are 100,000th fraction of a percent. However, what these people did was create the perfect situation for a rabies transmission if that squirrel, and like Carly said before, the chances of the raccoon, the chances that raccoon carrying rabies were probably very small. But we have no way of knowing, and since rabies is 100% fatal in humans, we can't take that risk. So now, yes, they took it in public, but what they've created was the perfect, because rabies is carried in saliva. Rabies is transmitted with any open wound or mucous membrane exposure. So now, okay, I'm going to stop for 1 second. Not 100% fatal. There is one documented survivor who is not the same. So there is no surviving rabies mentally, intellectually, or physically intact. How's that? Put it slightly differently. So now, what they have created was the perfect scenario for a potential transmission. Let's say that raccoon is a rabies carrier, and it is interacting with that squirrel in a friendly way. And they touch tongues, they touch mouths, they lick somebody's eye. That is rabies transmission, and that squirrel will get sick. And without knowing, because the incubation period can be 2 weeks to a year in a non-rabies vector animal, and potentially longer. And there is no way to test for rabies without euthanasia. Rabies shots is not an option if the animal is already a seeded carrier. Like, so if that raccoon had a long-term rabies infection, and Misfits, can you jump in here? Because you're probably more knowledgeable about that than I am.
Okay, about what?
Are rabies vaccines, let's say you have a carrier animal.
Yes, that's already infected.
Correct. Are they, like, let's say you have a raccoon, asymptomatic, but has rabies. Would a rabies vaccine be effective?
Not in curing them, but it would usually kill them faster because it would agitate the virus.
Okay.
But you're not going to fix it once they're infected. And that's why they have to do the euthanasia quickly, because they don't want the potential, like if it was a definite rabid animal that licked your finger and then you rubbed your eye, anything can happen. Then from now to when they got found, when it got confiscated, when it got tested, you're now days of that virus replicating in your body. So they're kind of fighting the clock as to if this is, odds are you're fine. Odds are, but are you going to take that percentage that you're not? That's what the state has to worry about, because that's a human life and it's going to go wrong if somebody ends up dying and they drop the ball.
Yep.
For the people in the comment that are trying to see how many people in the world had rabies, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant because this disease is a horrible disease, and you want to prevent it as much as you can from, if there is a chance, you want to prevent it from spreading. We're just beyond a pandemic that took so many lives. This is not about how many people survived. Do you want to take a risk on your life? Go ahead. Go bungee jump. But you also have the responsibility towards the people of your society and your community that you live in. And that's where integrity comes, when you look at the people around you and you take them into considerations with those decisions that you make when you have the knowledge.
Somebody was asking about the percentage of people with rabies worldwide. That's pretty high, because the third world countries have a lot of rabid dogs running around biting people and people dying of rabies every freaking day. In America, we don't have that issue. Why? Because we vaccinate our pets and we have wildlife rehabbers that are taking care of rabies vector animals, instead of having the backyard grandpa that raised 5 when he was young. And that story alone makes my skin crawl. And I got to the point now when people start with that whole story of, well, my uncle raised a raccoon once and had it as a pet, I stopped trying to be like, well, that's not good, or trying to like debunk them or anything. Now I usually ask them, oh, really? How long did they have that pet raccoon? Because it's usually about 2 years when they get sick and tired of it, ripping the cupboards off, the cupboard doors off, getting into all the food, tearing up the trash, tearing up the couch, and then they release them back into the wild after they've been habituated so that they can go out in the wild and die.
Yeah.
And listen, because we are passionate about the work that we do here, have very much gotten into the weeds and split a lot of hairs over like rabies and percentages, and some of y'all wanting to argue, that 100% youth death rate is not technically 100% because of 14 people. Like, we've gotten so far into the weeds. The entire point of this panel was to give everyone the full picture of what happened with Peanut and the raccoon. All right, because it had come into light that that they didn't do anything wrong. Like, poor them, poor everything. Now, they lost animals that meant something to them. Everyone here can relate to that. There isn't a person on this panel, probably in this chat for that matter, if you've ever had an animal and lost that animal, no matter how you lost that animal, it affects you emotionally. So we're not saying that we don't feel for them in terms of that, but what we are saying is it was preventable. What we are saying is what they did was dangerous. And because of how dangerous it was, because they were potentially exposing people to rabies. We don't want anyone to leave here terrified of raccoons. We don't want anyone to leave here terrified of your wildlife. We want you to have a healthy respect for wildlife and a healthy respect for what everyone here on this panel is doing. Because we have all actively had to combat the peanut squirrels of the world. Case in point, just talking about my Betty uncle's brother, Joe cousin, used to have a pet, raccoon, and they were the best pet raccoon. Every time I say that pet squirrels don't make good pets, somebody comes into my chat wants to talking about, well, that's not true. My sister had a pet squirrel once and she was a great squirrel. Okay. There's exceptions to every rule, but the reality is if they made great pets, we'd have them right up here next to cats and dogs. Like that. They don't make good pets. All right.
The thing that we want everyone to take away from this conversation here is that you need to pay attention to what is happening and look behind the scenes and look at the whys, get curious about it. The ripple effect and the snowball that is affecting wildlife rehabilitators because of this is hurting the people that want to save these animals. So there's a ripple effect that not just these two animals are going to die, but other animals, because people are going to start hating on wildlife rehabilitators now and stop donating to them. And they're already in a dire state. There are not enough wildlife rehabilitators. They don't get enough funding. They're begging for money. So there's a ripple effect that is really unhealthy.
I invited Because We Matter in, welcome. But part of the problem is so much money is going towards their legal defense.
Which there is no legal defense.
What are you, first of all, the animals are no longer with us, and that is unfortunate. But what are you going to get back from that? Are you suing because of the income those animals lost for you? That's where I get frustrated and kind of heated.
That is up for the lawyers, and whoever the lawyers and the legal system. Again, I think I really would like for us to stay focused on not so much the people and not trying to create a division, but really try to focus on what we can learn and move forward.
Right, but I want to point out is that the people up here on this panel who are doing the work, who need these donations desperately, are losing out right now.
Yes, that's what I was saying.
All right, ladies,
Absolutely.
I have to feed my puppies, and there is nothing louder than waking up an entire litter of puppies to bottle feed. I love all of you so dearly. So rather than just sitting on mute and not being able to contribute, I'm going to hop off. But thank you all for everything that you do. For everyone in the chat that was willing to listen, thank you. For everyone in the chat not willing to listen, I hope some seed of doubt got planted at some point, because I promise you everyone on this panel just wants what's best for the animals and humans alike that they interact with. Okay, everyone have an amazing night.
Wait, Carly, please, before you go.
Thanks, Carly.
Anybody who is not following Carly, please give her a follow. If you're not following any of these rehabbers up here, please follow them. The more followers we have, the more our videos get out there. We do get monetized for our videos, so it helps us. Even if you're not sending a dime, just following us is helpful. So please give everybody up here a follow if you are not already following all of the rehabbers on the screen. And Carly, thank you so much for being here. I have so much respect for you. I think you do an amazing job, and I appreciate all of your input tonight.
Oh,
I gotta get to
thanks,
bed.
Thank you. Have a good night.
I'm gonna hop off to her. If you can kick me off, I'm not sure how to do it, but I gotta be up in 4 hours for work, so I gotta get to bed.
Thanks, Lord.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
So if there are any other rehabbers who want to jump in, please just
Is
let me
Tasha
know.
here?
I am going to limit it to experienced rehabbers for tonight. But if you are an experienced rehabber, because I don't know you all, feel free to request to join. If you request to join, Okay, Cheryl, that's fine. But if you request to join, write in chat who you are. I didn't see Tasha here, no. But I may have missed her. So if she's here, she's more than welcome.
So I'm actually kind of the other side of things. We don't do rehab. We don't do rehabilitation or release. We actually do wildlife sanctuary to animals that cannot be released into the wild. So we actually take in animals from situations like this, where they actually go in and do a confiscation. Those animals can't be released because they've been too habituated. And so now they need to go to a place where they can just live out the rest of their life because they're tame, not domesticated, and cannot be re-released. So we work closely with animal control and other government authorities in situations like this. So
what are your feelings about what happened?
Well, we actually talked about this today, and I kind of almost lost my cool on my live today when I found out that 166,000 has gone to a squirrel. But what our ultimate intake on this is that if people have to understand that the law is the law, and that doesn't just go for normal Joe Schmo. It goes to even sanctuaries like mine that are USDA certified, Class C exhibitors, Class R research licensed, and able to have the proper permitting. I cannot legally take anything out of the wild that's not turned over to me by a government agency, period. I can't. I can only take in animals that have been captively bred and born, and there's proof and documentation of that animal being captively bred and born. And I can't take in any native species unless it is captively bred and born, and or if it was turned over to me by a government agency, Fish and Wildlife, and things like that. And I have all the licenses and I have all the accreditations to be able to do what I'm doing. I've been doing what I've been doing for 25 years. Like, I have the experience. So, but if I take in an animal from the wild and Fish and Wildlife find out about it, they will come into my sanctuary. And they will, and we're a legit sanctuary. They will come in and they will take the animal and they will euthanize it. It doesn't just happen because of it being a squirrel. It's because of how it was done. They took an animal out of the wild. And honestly, for me, it's not even about the rabies thing. Like that's not even what it's about. I understand that rabies and the chance of them having it is limited. I understand that completely. It's more for me that they just took an animal from the wild. And this is a sad consequence that we try to educate people about, that it needs to go to a licensed rehabilitation license that has minimal contact with the animal, that knows how to handle the animal so that it can be re-released into the wild and survive. Because this is what happens. They get the animal, they take care of it, they're the Good Samaritan, which is honorable, but because they did it not in a correct way, it does become attached to people. And it's not able to be re-released, which leads to euthanization by Fish and Wildlife or by a government authority.
That's a whole other issue of this ticky-tacky thing of the cute animals that has become a new trend of people taking all these cute wildlife, trying to save them when they're not even, when they don't want to be saved and don't need to be saved too sometimes, and people support it. And as wildlife rehabilitators and supporters of wildlife rehabilitators, the mission is to encourage people and explain to them that wildlife belongs in the wild, and not support the people that do this for the wrong reason.
Right. I just want to let Gina Scandriato know that I send you an invitation. And who else did I send an invitation to? And Courtney, if you guys want to jump in, accept the invitation.
I think that's also half of the big part of this impact of this whole situation, because we were talking a little bit how it affects rehabbers and public perception, but another huge impact is, yes, how people see wildlife, whether they see them as pets, whether they can take them in on their own. They can be as so well-intentioned and mean so much help and have so much compassion, but if the care is not exactly what the animal might need. Kale, you've made many posts about this. I know you're very experienced with this, where you have had to take in animals that are end up not doing well because of misinformed care. Now, because we matter, you're kind of getting like the animals that are like non-releasable, and you're giving them sanctuary. But the other half of that the consequence is the emotional toll that rehabbers take when we end up getting these animals 2-3 weeks, months into someone trying to care for them, and the animal's declining. And then we are the ones that have to make the hard decision about the next step of care. Kale, if you want to, because you have talked about this so much.
Okay, so most notably, and I'll see if I could find the video, I wish there was like a repost option on TikTok, where I could just bump up one of my own videos. Most notably, I received a baby squirrel that somebody found. I had just had my last shoulder surgery, the middle one, and I was at physical therapy, and I had, I was not thriving yet, and I was not answering my phone typically at physical therapy. My physical therapist went to use the restroom. My phone rang, I answered it. I have a baby squirrel, he's very sick, I need your help. I said, okay, I'm at physical therapy right now. I'm going to be home in about an hour, hour and a half, because I have to take an Uber home. If you want, just shoot me a text, and I will be more than happy to give you my address when I'm on my way home. No, you need to take it now. I'm sorry? You need to take it now. I think he's dying. I said, sir, I am at physical therapy. I just had shoulder surgery. I will take it once I get home. If this squirrel dies, it's your fault. I said, sir, I can give you a number for a couple of other experienced rehabbers, but I can't take it until I get home. So I said, if you want me to contact you when I'm on my way home, send me a text. He texts me. He meets me at my door. He hands me a squirrel that is breathing once or twice a minute. I asked him how long he's had it, what happened to it. It was about 6 or 7 weeks old, I'd say 7 weeks old. And he had it 8 or 9 days. He was feeding it apples, walnuts, and water. The squirrel was hypoglycemic, hypocalcemic, and actively dying. Now, again, I have spoken about my background. I have an extensive human medical background. And I have almost 40 years of wildlife rehab under my belt. I started mixing a concoction that could be absorbed through oral mucosa with glucose and calcium. The squirrel started to have seizures. Now, I had a student observing me that day. I was able to get real-time video of this entire process. Now, I have amazing, amazing vets that trust me. I keep a very small amount of narcotics, 1 dose in the house of Valium, 1 dose of a narcotic painkiller that I report immediately if I have to use that, or if they get an audit, I have to return it, no questions asked, that day, and prove that that medicine has not been used. If I use that medicine, I have to call in. It goes on their log immediately. And I mean, I'm talking about a fraction of a tenth of a cc. But I have anti-seizure medications on hand. But when he started to seize, if I break that seizure, I am masking the cause. I don't know if I've corrected the problem. And I am sitting there balancing sugar and calcium through his oral mucosa to keep him alive. Now, that animal survived, but you watch him have seizure after seizure. I had 50 squirrels, healthy orphans at that time. I feed my babies on a very tight schedule because, God forbid, I get stuck on a rescue or get a critical baby and they have to miss a feeding. They are none the worse for wear. They may be a little bit more hungry, and that's it. But I so resented watching my squirrels standing there on their toes, on their cages, holding onto the bars, watching me care for this baby, waiting for their food. waiting for their bottles, their nurse, to be nursed. It is, what we do is stressful enough. What we do is anxiety causing. It is, there is so much loss and, Kayla, thank you. I don't know. You know what? Can you post that to my Discord? And this way Kayla just texted me the link to that one particular video that I'm talking about. But if you post it in my Discord, maybe people can get to it easier. This squirrel survived. I don't know any other rehabber in this area that could have saved that squirrel. Because watching the seizures, balancing sugar, balancing calcium, and just knowing that if I gave him an anticonvulsant, if I masked those seizures, I would never know if I corrected the metabolic problem. So I am the one that suffered. And if that squirrel died, when I get these babies that are aspirated, when somebody calls me up, I found a baby squirrel, I'm at work, I can bring it tonight. And I say, do not feed that squirrel. I would rather get a dehydrated, malnourished baby. I can fix that, but I can't fix aspirated. I cannot fix cow's milk or KMR or formula in their lungs. I can't do it. And then I am the one who has to watch the baby die. I am the one who has to sit up as it struggles to take its last breath. I don't want to do that. I don't need any more pain. There is enough pain in what we do. And I so resent people who selfishly cause rehabbers that kind of distress.
I think, though, a lot of that has to...
About the squirrel, and when you tried to connect him with other squirrels, what happened?
Okay, so I spoke about this earlier.